4B part 2, isolating y. Now we do this. This one happens to be isolating y. Many times we don't always just say, hey, let's isolate y. We can say isolate x, especially when we get into area and formulas. We want sometimes to a specific variable, so it's not always y, but this worksheet, it is. So let's look at number 3 here. Here we go. Here goes our focus. Come on. There we go. Okay. Now I picked number 3 because it's these are kind of a little bit of a harder problem where you have to quote unquote undistribute. Okay. So we look at this, and usually there's a statement over here. It usually tells us, hey, what variable to solve for. Okay. This whole worksheet you're solving for y. So I'm looking at this, and I'm like, well, where do I start? Because there's a y over here, there's a y over here on this side of the equal sign. I'm not even sure where to start. Okay, we have y in 2 terms. We have y here and we have y here. So at some point, because it's in 2 terms, we're going to have to do what we like to call undistribute, even though it's not technically a strategy. Mathematical strategy, you're dividing out, but we like to call it undistribute. Okay, so the first thing we have to do is get the y's terms. You got 2 terms. We have to get them on the same side of the equation. Okay? So I'm going to get this negative xy term over here, mainly because it'll make it positive. And I like positive numbers. Okay. So this adds up to 0. I'm going to bring down my plus 8. Now, here's where a lot of students make a mistake. They'll look at this and say, oh, here's a y term, here's a y term. So 2y plus 9xy is 11xy. And it's not. These are not like terms because this one has an x in it. So you have to leave it separate. 2y plus 9xy. Please don't combine unlike terms. Now, I'm looking at this, and I have a y in this term. I have a y in this term. I'm going to go ahead and pull that y out. Okay, and this is why we call this undistributed, because I'm going to end up with parentheses here. And what I'm actually doing is I'm dividing out a y from each one of these terms. So for this first term here in the parentheses, I'm going to take my 2y, I'm going to divide it by y, so actually my y's cancel, and I'm left with 2. Bring down my plus sign. This term, I'm dividing out the y, so these y's are going to cancel. I'm left with 9x. And bring down my 8. Now I just made this a 1 term. This is all multiplication in here. I made it 1 term because I forced this to be 1 number times another number, that makes this 1 term. It's all multiplication. So now, since it's all multiplication, I'm going to divide it out by what I don't want. And I don't want the 2 plus 9x. Now, don't forget, whatever I do to one side of the equation, I have to do to the other. So I have to divide that 8 by 2 plus 9x. These cancel. And I'm left with that y all by itself. Now, I don't really care what this side of the equation is or looks like. I just want to make sure my y is by itself. So I'm going to put this whole thing on the other side. If you want, you can keep the parentheses. But that's my answer. I have y isolated. Any questions? So whenever you have y in two terms, or whatever variable you're solving for in two terms, eventually you're going to have to do this undistribute thing. Okay, so go ahead, watch videos, do the, I think, is there a Delta Math practice on this? Well, if there is, do that, and then do this practice worksheet. And if you're still having problems tomorrow, we can do another example in Google Meets. Okay? All right, so that's it for this. I'm going to stop the recording.